Alright guys, so I got a quick one for you today on the best long range option that's not a sniper rifle. I've plugged into the True Game Data website the top options when it comes to longest range. I've checked the stats on a bunch of different guns, and I'm only including the ones that are most viable. I'm trying to find the guns that have the best balance between TTK, range, and lowest recoil. Recoil is a huge factor when it comes to landing shots at long range, so some of the guns didn't make the list just because they weren't controllable enough. Now I found that most guns that excel at long range are LMGs. For the most part, the statistics show that the LMG category outshines ARs when it comes to fighting out over 50 meters. It seems to be the way they balance the trade-off between the speed and maneuverability you get with ARs compared to the damage at long range you get with the slower LMGs. Now the chart can get a little confusing because it shows that the TTKs are pretty competitive on at least 4 or 5 of the guns that are listed, but when you look at the damage drop-offs, now you can really start to narrow down the guns on the list. You can see that the UGM-8 and the DP27, they both drop off to almost 900 milliseconds to kill when they reach a certain range, and then the Whitley stays competitive out to almost 70 meters before dropping off, but it still gets beaten both TTK and recoil by the top 2 guns. Now the chart shows that both the MG42 and surprisingly the Modern Warfare Fin LMG are the best 2 options when it comes to fighting at long range. They both basically have the same time to kill out to around 35 meters. After that, the Fin drops off a little bit and then the MG42 beats it by about 50 milliseconds for the next 20 or so meters. After that, the MG42 drops off, getting beat by the Fin by about 30 milliseconds, give or take. Now when it comes to TTK, anything around 50 milliseconds or below really isn't much of a difference, especially when you're fighting at long range. Now where the MG42 shines most is when you switch over to head, neck, stomach, and limb shots. The Fin doesn't see much of an advantage when it comes to other parts of the body, whereas the MG42 stays in the top 2 everywhere except neck shots. Now it's not that easy just to hit a specific part of the body when you're fighting out that far, so you're going to want to take those stats with a grain of salt. Now when you take into account aim down sight speed and recoil control, the Fin rather easily beats the MG42, at least statistically. In order to set up the MG42 for really long range, you're going to have to sacrifice a little bit of aim down sight speed in order to make it controllable enough to hit your shots. Now the Fin on the other hand aims in pretty quick and it's an absolute laser beam. It has very little recoil and it's super controllable. It makes it a lot easier to land your shots at range, especially if you're more of a casual player. Now in my opinion, when it comes to fighting out at 50, 60 plus meters, the Fin is the gun that I would probably go with. It's definitely one of the easier guns to control in the game. Now I'm personally not a fan of LMGs. I like the speed and maneuverability you get with the ARs, but if you're someone who likes to keep your fights at long distance, either the MG42 or the Fin is definitely a good way to go. Now with the MG42, there's a few different builds depending on how you're using it. After testing a bunch of different attachments, I found for me that this is the best build for controlling the gun at long range. For this build, you're going to want the MX silencer, the VDD 890-32M barrel, that's very important for recoil control, and then you want the 1229/Slate 3.25 custom. This actually gives you accuracy and recoil control that's built right into it, but if you find that the recoil is still a little too much, you can always go with the M38 2.5x custom. It has the same accuracy and recoil control built into it, but it has a little less visual recoil because it has a lower magnification. Next, you want the Crossnick S91 padded stock. This is going to give you better recoil control when you're firing, and it's going to give you even more control when you're mounted or crouched. This is important because we're going to stack it with 3 other attachments. Next, you're going to want tight grip because it's going to give you the same control as the stock, and then you want on hand for aim down sight speed, and then polymer grip because again, it's giving you that same recoil control as the other 2 attachments. And then you want lengthened in the 6.5 Shakura 125 round drum. And then lastly, you should try the bipod because it's stacking with the stock to give you way better recoil control when you're crouched. Whenever you're about to fire at long range, all you'll have to do is crouch, mount, or go prone, and you'll notice that the gun is now a lot easier to control. If you haven't tried it, I recommend you give it a shot. It really does make a huge difference. If not, you can always just go with the Carver grip or the hand stop. Now when it comes to the Fin, this is the build that I use. Just make sure you equip the XRK Longshot Adverse Barrel. That's very important for the TTK and damage range. Try not to confuse it with the XRK Longshot Advantage Barrel. The stats are totally different. Now if you want a little bit faster reload time, you can always swap out either the underbarrel or the laser for sleight of hand. If you swap out the underbarrel, you're just going to have to control the recoil a little bit more, and if you swap out the laser, it'll be a little bit slower to aim down sight, and you'll see a little bit more sway when you're aiming aiming in. And then lastly, if you find that you're running out of ammo too quickly, you can always swap out something for the 5.56 NATO 100 round belt. Just make sure it's the first one that has the NATO rounds. The other two lower the stats quite a bit. You either want the NATO rounds or no ammo type selected at all. Now with the fin, there's not much recoil. You're only going to have to pull down very slightly with your right stick to get it to shoot straight. The best thing about this gun is how ridiculously easy it is to control. The only thing I would remember with this gun is try to hit chest shots and above when you can. That's where it shines. Stomach and limb shots are going to slow down the TTK a little bit. Now with the MG42, you're going to have to pull down a little bit more. The recoil is pretty much straight up and down, but you're going to have to put a little bit more effort into controlling it. If you're using the bipod, all you have to do is crouch or mount anytime you're fighting at long range, and you're going to notice it's much easier to compensate the recoil. The bipod gets it a lot closer to how the fin is in terms of control. And then lastly, I just want to say after using both guns for a few days, the MG42 can feel like it kills faster than the fin just because you're getting a significant neck and headshot bonus. Plus you're not getting penalized for stomach and limb shots like you are with the fin. The fin's a laser beam, it's super controllable, but the MG42 is also a monster when it comes to TTK. If you found this video helpful, drop a like, follow me over on Twitter to stay up to date on everything Warzone and Warzone 2, and subscribe to the YouTube channel for more short, straight to the point videos like this. I'll catch you next time, and if not, kick rocks. Peace.
Kick rocks, biatch!